Well, good morning, everyone. I appreciate you joining us. If you don't mind, in the chat section, if you can hear me and see me, please type in real quick that everything looks good. I want to make sure that everything's operating properly before we get going. So just a quick okay, looks good, anything would be great. So good deal. Everybody seems to be responding positively, so it's good when technology actually works. So I appreciate you joining us this morning. This was originally intended to be a live event, and we ended up changing it, obviously, to a webinar instead. So one good thing about that is webinars tend to go much, much faster because of the limited interaction that we have with each other. Tends to move along quicker. So although we had figured on somewhere around an hour or so for this, we'll probably get done in 45 minutes or less, depending on what questions that you might have. So what we are going to get into today is talking about business class phones. And we created this because we had a lot of folks that were asking us about changing out their phone systems. They're wanting to know more about what new technology is out there. And so we thought this would be a great topic to put together to go over this subject. So let's jump right into it. Let me stop my video so I'm not distracting you, and we'll go from there. Okay. To begin with, this is our agenda for today. We'd only have a few quick topics. One of them, why is this conversation relevant? We're going to explain quickly, not into a technical, we're not going to do a deep dive, but we are going to explain on how VoIP system actually work. And we're going to compare a traditional phone system, which is also called the PBX, to a hosted voice over IP system. And we'll talk about some of the myths as well that revolve around VoIP phones. And then at the end, we're going to give some real life examples with real money examples showing you what the cost and or savings can be for various size companies, so you can get an idea of what might actually apply for your business. So to begin with, first topic, relevance to my business. The whole point of us even having this conversation is because we want to make sure that that we're delivering some content that's applicable to your business and how you work and your bottom line as well. Phones are still the primary means of communication, of course. Everybody's got texting and email and lots of different ways, but pretty much for most small businesses, the phones are still your primary source. So you need something that is reliable, something that that if you're looking to purchase a system or move to a new system, you don't want to do this frequently. Changing phone systems can be a painful process if you've ever done it in the past. And you've got to learn the new systems, you've got to get everything installed. It can just be a pain. So we're here to help you create a system you only have to purchase and design one time. In this modern age, you also need the ability to scale. You may start with 5 phones or 10 phones, whatever it is, and hopefully your business is growing so that way you can scale up and as well as scale down. Sometimes business retracts. Sometimes the economy takes a downturn and you don't want to get stuck with an expensive system or paying for things you don't need. So you need to be able to scale either way. Another thing that's fairly new is mobility. We're seeing some interesting ways that folks are using mobility, that they're having road warriors out there, that they're wanting to be able to use the phone system just like they're there at the office. Some folks are working from home. There's lots of different applications for that. And of course, the last one, we're all office managers and business owners on this call. as best I can tell. So we want to ultimately save some money. If we can increase productivity and save money, then that's a good day. So let's go on. To begin with, what is VoIP? That term gets tossed around a lot, and folks, a lot of times they don't know exactly what it is. All VoIP is voice over internet protocol. That's what the acronym stands for. And it just means sending your voice across the internet. The same way you're browsing the internet or you're getting email across the internet, we can also send voice packets across the internet. And the advantage in doing that is it doesn't require phone lines. That internet connection that you're already paying for can serve double duty and take care of your phone lines as well. So you're already going to get a glimpse as to how you can potentially save some money here. If you have a lot of phone lines, and we can just eliminate them by sending that traffic over the internet line, you can cut that out and eliminate that expense. So let's take a quick look at what a traditional business phone system looks like. And this is what a lot of you already have at your office. And all this is if a client calls you, the phone call goes up to the phone company and then hits your office. Simple enough. There is typically a phone system either hanging on the wall, it's on a shelf, that's somewhere at your office that is managing those calls. And all of the phones plug into that phone system. And that's the type of box that will typically require maintenance. If you're growing, you'll need to snap additional cards into it. I'm sure you're all familiar with this type of box. So the standard phone system, it's got some good points, and it's also got some things that you need to consider. The good points for it is typically you buy that box one time. So that's good. You got one initial expense and you're done. However, you do have to pay for your lines, like we talked about earlier. If you've got a Spectrum connection and you've got a half a dozen lines, you're paying for those lines coming in every month. Your cabling is usually in place already, especially for older offices. They're already wired for the old phones. And new users don't cost you any more per month. What I mean by that is if you've got, say, 6 users at your office and you need to add 2 more, you just buy a couple more phones, plug them into that PBX system, and there's no additional expense. You're still paying for the same 6 lines with Spectrum that you had before. So that's basically your good points for a traditional phone system. Some of the things to consider, though, is that the moment you buy that box and hang it on the wall, it starts getting older. It's going to become outdated. Not only are the parts going to be harder to find, we find a lot of people that end up searching eBay and so forth, just trying to find handsets and additional spare parts for their system. But also the worst thing is that the features tend to become outdated. What you need right now could be radically different from what you need 5 years from now, or especially 10 years from now. But that box on the wall is going to stay the same. Nothing really changes about it. So you have to keep that in mind. Also, scaling can be difficult. Let's say you go from 6 users to 12. Well, if that system capped out at 10 users and that's all it can handle, then you've got to replace the whole darn thing. So there's things like that that you have to be thinking about as well when you're designing a system. Also, a box hanging on the wall is vulnerable to acts of God. You could have lightning, you could have water damage, you could have a whole series of different things could happen that could damage that system and take you down, so your business isn't able to get its phone calls. Now let's compare this traditional type of system to a on-premise voice over IP system. And at first glance, you can tell nothing changed, to be honest with you. This box is still hanging on the wall, and there's a lot of these systems out there, like the Avayas and the Toshibas, and there's several different ones like that, that it looks exactly the same. The only difference is the phones themselves and the connectors that they use. The older style 6-pin RJ11 connectors are typically your old style phones, and the newer RJ45, this is the network connected voice over IP phones. You can tell, not every time, but you can usually tell a difference, what technology is being used by looking at the cabling. And the problem that you've got with the on-premise VoIP system is it's exactly the same limitations that you had with the other. Yes, you do get a few more features, but you still have the box on the wall. You still have the same vulnerabilities, and it really didn't improve the situation. It's better, but it didn't really make much of a difference. So here is where the big difference comes in. With a hosted VoIP system, the connections are in the cloud. In other words, there is no box on the wall. The phones actually connect up to the internet just like your computer does. And the phone system is actually in the cloud, in data centers. So it eliminates, first off, the cost, because you don't have to buy that box on the wall. You don't have the service calls and the service fees because there's no equipment there to manage or to service or to even do an upgrade for, and it eliminates the failure points. So, and matter of fact, failure points, that brings up the most popular question whenever we see this diagram, is folks ask, well, what happens if I lose internet connection? If I lose that internet connection, my receptionist can't answer the phone anymore. I'm dead in the water, so this technology won't work for me. Well, normally that would be the case, but there are protection built into the system to help eliminate this as a problem. For example, if somebody hits a pole, let's just use that as an example, at your office, and they knock out the power and they knock out the internet. Well, if you have no power, even your traditional system is going to be dead in the water. But with this, the system itself is in the cloud. Your auto attendant is still going to answer. That client is not going to know that you're even down. They're going to get an auto attendant. They can still reach extensions. They can still leave voicemails. We could even route it to a cell phone. As a matter of fact, even if you're down, you can also, with our system, you can launch a mobile app and you're instantly back up and running again, taking calls on your cell phone. You didn't have to do any call forwarding. You didn't have to do anything. Your cell phone can become your desk phone just as easily as launching the app. So it gives you some incredible redundancy and the ability to stay operational that you don't get with a traditional system. If we do a quick comparison of the two, you can see that with a traditional system, you've got that on-site box that you pay for, and then you're just paying for the lines after that. You end up paying Spectrum, AT&T, or whoever it is. That on-site box can be expensive to begin with. The technology, of course, is going to be out of date as soon as you buy it because it starts getting old. You've got lightning, power issues, etc., that can knock you down. You also can have problems with expansion. A lot of those systems, the boxes on the wall, they have cards that have to be inserted into them to add 4 more lines or add more extensions, things of that nature. That means there's a service call that has to be made. Somebody has to come on site. You have to buy the parts, etc. And as time goes on, finding those parts can be really tricky. If you're unlucky enough to have one of the older Toshiba systems, Toshiba got out of the phone business a couple of years ago. So every Toshiba system that you see out there is extremely difficult to support. And it's not just them. You'll also run into ones like Avaya and Panasonic and others that as they age, the manufacturer will just stop supporting them. They don't make parts anymore, they don't support them, and finding those parts can be really hard. You're going to really be searching eBay for used parts and hoping that they work so they can keep your business running. That's not a good strategy. So if we look at hosted VoIP or a hosted phone system, it just has nothing but benefits in this regard. There's no box to purchase, so you eliminate all that upfront expense. You've got upgrades and updates are constantly being pushed out. That is to me, one of the most wonderful things. Obviously, I'm in the tech business. I love technology. I love to see new things, playing with new features and that sort of thing. With a hosted system, it's always being updated. There's no firmware to update. There's nothing extra to purchase typically. You just get the new features as they come out, or certain features might be available at a premium, but at least you have access to them. It's not like it's the same system you bought 10 years ago and nothing's changed. One thing with a hosted system, though, is you need a reliable internet connection. That is paramount. Your voice traffic is going over the internet, so you need to make sure that that connection is stable. If it's not, then we can work with your internet provider, work with your router provider, and make sure that we get what we need before the system is engaged or before everything gets converted over. Another thing with a hosted system is that scaling is very easy. Just like you add an email address, it's literally that easy. It's just a mouse click, type in a name, give them an extension, and you've got a new employee set up. It's very, very simple. Parts can also be swapped out for different manufacturers. Unlike I keep going back to the Avaya and Toshiba because those are just such great examples. If you bought a Toshiba system, you're using Toshiba phones. You'll always be using Toshiba phones, and that's all. You just don't have any choice. You're married to them for life. And with ours, it doesn't work that way. Ours is more generic. Think of it again like the email, as I mentioned before. With email, you can use a Mac, you can use a PC, you can use a tablet, you can use anything you want and make it work. Ours is very, very flexible like that. Typically, we use Yealink phones. I really like the features and the value that they provide and the quality level. But if you don't like Yealink, that's okay. We can use Polycom, we can use Cisco, we can use lots of different ones. So it makes it very versatile. That way, we never have to come back to a client and say, oh, this isn't available anymore, this won't work, you've got to tear everything out and start over again. Not happening. That's not the way we designed this to work. Some of the myths that we hear when we're out visiting customers is that if the internet goes down, you're dead in the water. Well, I think we just covered that. If the internet does go down, it is true that your phone on your desk is not going to ring because it has no signal, just like a traditional phone on your desk isn't going to ring if a line gets cut or you don't have power. But you do have those other options. As I mentioned, we can reroute to a cell phone, we can reroute to another office, we can, even if you don't reroute, the customer is still going to get that auto attendant and still going to be able to leave voicemail and so forth. So it makes sense. Some folks look at it and think VoIP may cost more than an on-premise PBX. Well, that one varies a little bit. Sometimes it does cost a little bit more. Many times we see it save companies money. When you can eliminate those phone lines, it actually ends up paying for itself. Plus, you don't have that initial upfront cost of that expensive box. You don't have the contracts that typically come along with it. And they typically also sell service contracts on top of the contracts to cover the hardware. So with voice over IP, you just don't have to deal with that. One of the things that we include with our service is all of the service. If you need help, we have a help desk that's available and answers calls. They can solve questions very quickly, make changes for you. There's never a charge for that. Even if we have to come out on site, this is unheard of in the industry. We don't charge for that either. If we have to come on site, and it's very, very rare, but if we have to come on site to work on the phones, no worries. You're not going to get another invoice for that. So when you factor all of these things in that you're probably already paying for, it really ends up being a cost-effective solution. Another myth is that the quality is worse than a regular phone line or a traditional landline, and that's definitely false. If your internet is set up correctly and your quality is adjusted, which we help you with, then the quality is actually much better. It is a true digital signal, unlike the old analog signal that a traditional phone line has. So you get a much, much clearer call, and there's no such thing as static on a digital line. So it really ends up being a quality experience. Some folks worry about security because it's going over the internet. I can tell you that putting voice packets back together in order to create any kind of an eavesdropping is very, very difficult. It would be much, much simpler to go out and tap into your hard line, just connect a couple of leads and you're listening in. That would be a lot easier than trying to eavesdrop onto a VoIP conversation. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's much more difficult. So security is actually better with the VoIP system. And then we also see this, and although I've got it listed as a myth, there are some companies that can't do this. Some folks can't use a standard fax machine because it uses traditional dial tone, or they can't interface with a paging system or other devices. And it's true to a degree. Some companies can't do that. Our system is so versatile that we can. So if you want to keep using the traditional fax, we can give you dial tone for that. We've got an adapter, works great, not a problem. If you've got a paging system, if you've got overhead paging systems, if you want to put a strobe light out in the warehouse so when the phone rings it flashes and lets the shop floor manager know, we can do things like that. We are very, very versatile in what our system is able to do. I want to take just a moment, and literally, I'm just going to take 1 minute because we've been going on and on here. And I want to double check the chat, see if there's any questions, and give you a second to refill your coffee. So if you have any questions at all, please let me know. I'm going to be here for you, and we're just going to take 1 minute so I can review any questions that are in the chat, and then we'll get right back to it. I do see a question in here that says, what kind of phones work with VoIP? The older style phones that you would typically have, again, your Avayas, your Toshibas, your Panasonics, things like that, and especially the ones that only have the 4 or 6 connector wires going to them, typically will not work with VoIP. So they're that way by design. They want you to stay with those companies, and they're just not compatible, so they're not going to work. Uh, it really just depends on the phone itself and what model it is. If you have any questions, send me the model number of the phone that you have a question about. We can look it up and see what it's compatible with. That was a good question. And I think we're about ready to get back into it. So, and we are over halfway through already. So we're zooming right through, just as I expected. The seminars always go really fast. So, okay, the first case study that I want to look at so we can see some real problems with some real solutions and some real dollar amounts, and we can see how this adds up and see how it might work for your business. We had a local government that we installed phones for. This was the scenario: local city government, roughly 100 employees. They had 8 different sites when you look at things like water departments and inspection departments and city hall and so forth. The phones were roughly 20 years old and they were starting to fail. As I mentioned earlier, folks were running out on eBay trying to find spare parts because the manufacturer didn't support them anymore, didn't make the parts anymore. And due to compliance, they were needing some special features like call recording for the police department that was just not available on that old system. So the goals were, first off, keep the costs down. Replacing that central system that could connect 8 different sites with over 100 phones was going to be extremely expensive. When you price something like that from Cisco, for example, you're going to be looking at a minimum of 50 grand just for the central system itself. It can be very, very expensive. And then you have to buy all the handsets and everything to go with it. They wanted the potential to scale. What if they open 2 more sites and need 20 more employees? They wanted to be able to grow easily. They needed to transfer calls to other sites or use intercom, which they couldn't do before. Every site was disconnected, basically. So the city was rather disjointed. They, of course, wanted new phones. They didn't want those 20-year-old ones, and they wanted a plan for replacement. And they, of course, needed the call recordings and needed that to be stored in a secure place, since we're talking about government business and police calls. So the solution that we recommended to them was one citywide hosted phone system. We didn't have to worry about connecting each site individually like it was before, or like an on-premise system would require, because everything went to the cloud anyway. They could just plug a phone in anywhere and it became part of the system. Intercom, everything works. They could add and remove an extension very easily in the control panel. Just create the new user, as I mentioned before, assign an extension, name a phone, and plug it in, and they're good to go. So very, very easy to administer. Plus, they love the fact that we do that for them at no charge. So it takes labor off of their staff. They didn't have to worry about it. And this is a very, very unique thing for folks that get our service. We give a lifetime warranty on the phones, because cost of ownership was one of the big things that they were concerned about. They didn't want to run into the same thing that they had before, where it was a service problem. Where are they going to get parts? Where are they going to get service? That sort of thing, looking down the road. We even cover the cords. You know, if the cord goes bad, we even replace that. It's no charge. As long as you have service with us, then we give you a lifetime warranty. And call recording could be turned off and on easily for any user that needed it. It wasn't a whole system-wide deal where it was either all or nothing. They were able to pick which department, which users, etc. they could choose recording for, and we could give them off-site storage in the cloud that was encrypted, so it met their compliance needs. And this was the wonderful part. Cost savings for this was $40,000 a year. Yes, our tax money being saved, not spent. What a wonderful thing. So that was great. I can't say every company and every business is going to save this much, but this was a great example of where VoIP really paid off for this particular client. And the main reasons why was multiple sites played a lot into this. They had individual phone lines for every single site, and a lot of those were on older contracts, so they were paying way too much for those lines. By eliminating all the lines, we're able to pool the resources and just provide a more efficient way of handling their communications. They didn't have the physical phone system to purchase, so that upfront fee was gone as well, and their ongoing costs have dropped dramatically, as you saw, $40,000 a year saving. As a matter of fact, this particular install, I think they paid for everything, including the installation, the whole deal. They had a return on investment in, I think it was 4 months. This was as much of a no-brainer as there ever could be. So that was a large install. We've got much larger out there, but this was a fairly good size install. Let's look at one that's a little bit closer to what some of you folks that are on the call can equate to. This is a 20-person accounting firm that we installed for. They have one location and a few remote users, some folks that work from home. And same thing, phones were about 20 years old, and they were doing the eBay search as well. And they had a unique problem, though, that they had scaling issues during tax season. Just like a lot of accounting firms, decent-sized accounting firms, they hire temporary folks during the heavy tax season, and then they let them go for the rest of the year. So they needed to be able to scale up and scale right back down again. So some of the goals that they wanted was they wanted to be able to transfer to the remote users without giving out cell phone numbers. They really didn't want to be using cell phones. That just didn't make a lot of sense. You didn't want your end client to be getting temporary folks' cell phone numbers. That just isn't good for the long term. They wanted the ability to work from home if they wished. Obviously, they needed new phones, same problem that the city had before, and the scaling issue that we talked about. So here's what we ended up with. We put in one hosted cloud system, and this ended up being an amazing because they had talked about wanting to work from home as well, and they had an employee that actually moved to Vegas, and that employee took his phone with him, just took his desk phone with him. And as I mentioned, the phones connect directly up to the cloud, just like your computer does. So he plugged it in Vegas instantly. He's part of the network. He's able to take calls. He's able to transfer calls. Even intercom works. No one knows this guy's in Vegas unless he tells them. So it's just amazing what this the versatility this has, and that's without a VPN, without any complicated network setup. He just plugs the phone in, and he's running and working. For the folks that do want to work from home, they get the mobile app, so they can just launch the mobile app on their phone anytime they're out of the office. Their mobile phone can act just like their desk phone. They can still intercom, they can make and take calls, and they don't give out their cell phone number. Once again, no one knows that they're not sitting at their desk. They could be anywhere and still making calls. They were able to use a variety of different phones, not just default, take it or leave it, only one choice. They were able to provide their temporary staff with basic phones that have limited features just so they can make and take calls. They didn't need anything fancy. They just needed very cost-effective solution for these temporary staff. But the rest of the group that's there, the partners and the full-time staff, they got to keep full-featured, beautiful color phones, and they got a lifetime warranty on everything. as far as being scalable, we don't have contracts. So that means you can turn phones on and off very quickly to control cost. So during tax season, we activate the phones. They pay per month per extension for the active phones. As soon as tax season's off or over, we turn those phones off. And it's that easy to scale up and scale down. There are also unlimited quick button changes. This is one that I love, and everybody seems to suffer from this. At your office, how many buttons do you have on your phone that point to people that maybe haven't been there in 5 years? Or your voicemails are set up for folks that have been gone for a long time. They're in the directory, and you don't have a clue how to get them out of there. Things like that happen all the time. We see that, and it doesn't stop business, but it's annoying to say the least. With the hosted system, that doesn't happen. We just go in, we change the name. It'll actually reprogram the buttons on the phones, change the names for you, and it just makes everything management so much simpler with a hosted system. To get all of these great features, it did have a cost for this particular company. It was $40 more a month than what their old limited way was. So they did have a small amount of cost there, but that was still a win-win in my view. The last one I wanted to look at is, let's go really small. For the small company, 4 employees. This was a car dealership locally. They actually had a VoIP system. They had it with another provider, one of the national brands, and they were having issues with transferring calls. They had voice quality issues. They actually had service issues too. The national brand, just like a lot of them, outsource all of their help desk. And so every time they called in, they literally ended up going to talk to someone in the Philippines. And obviously, there's no on-site, there's no real troubleshooting that's being done. It was just a pain to deal with. The price was good, but you get what you pay for. Like I said, you can't get good service with that type of a design. And they had no mobile use. They didn't have any cordless phones, nothing was available, and they didn't have a mobile app. So being a small company, they're very cost sensitive as well. And they did have VoIP phones, so they were wanting to use those phones if they could. And our versatility made that happen. So that was good. We were able to actually reuse them. And they, of course, wanted to fix the voice quality and the dropped calls, and they really needed mobility. Their sales reps are out there walking the lot and needed to be able to take calls. They just didn't have many employees, so they needed to be as efficient as they possibly could. So what we did is we diagnosed the network, found out there was some settings on the network that needed to be adjusted. That's one of the nice things about us being an IT company and a phone company, is we know the language and we know the landscape, so we can do true troubleshooting. The company that outsources and sends all their help desk to the Philippines, they're rather limited in what they're able to do and see, but we're able to take care of it for them. So we were able to fix the network problems. We were able to use their existing phones, and I can't say we can always use the existing phones, because sometimes you will run into those Avaya and Toshiba and Panasonic solutions where they are hard fixed to only work with that brand. But there are some out there that are flexible and we can reuse them. So we can always take a look at that and see. That's on a one-by-one basis, because it's always different. We were able to bring the phone numbers over, and that's another thing I forgot to mention earlier. When you do go to a cloud-based system, usually 99% of the time we can bring over the same phone numbers, so you don't have to change numbers. There's no difference there. For this customer, we also were able to install some cordless phones, and we showed them the free mobile app that we have. and they even enabled texting on that mobile app. Because that was an important part of their business. And so everything was integrated. While we were working with the network provider, which was Spectrum, we noticed that they had an old contract. So we talked to them, went over the options, and was able to double their internet speed with no change in cost. It's another thing that we do. Again, those other companies, especially the national ones, they're not going to take that concern. They're not going to take that time to look at the solution. They're just wanting to sell you phones. We're wanting to give you the best experience possible. So we solved all their problems, solved their quality problems, gave them the additional features, doubled the internet speed, and yeah, they had a cost too. It was a whole $11 a month, more than they were paying before. So once again, definitely a win. And as we wrap up, I wanted to hit just the top 5 things that you should really be looking out for when you look to moving to voice over IP. There are a lot of vendors out there. I don't actually have it on this list, but I've mentioned it a couple of times now, is service. That is so important. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about phones, computers, or getting your car worked on. It doesn't matter. Service is important. And if all your service is being outsourced, or you can't get in touch with them when you need to, or they're just super slow to respond, you're not going to have a good experience. So check that out. Make sure what their average response time is, and talk to some people that have that service, so you can get some real life results or experiences. Some of them will give away free phones. Nothing's free. Everybody knows that. If you're in business, there's always a cost that's going to be rolled into the monthly fee or rolled in somewhere else. But even with that, the free phones that a lot of them give away are not modern phones. They're the phones that are 2 or 3 years out of date, that are overstock, that are things like that have very few features. A free phone is not necessarily a great phone. So think about that. A lot of them have contracts, and the contracts can be very limiting, and some of them can be ironclad as well. So you want to watch out for that, as well as, do they sell service contracts and so forth. Is it a system that is, once again, going to be a box on the wall, has a central point of failure? If it does, you may want to reconsider and say, maybe we should be looking at a different solution. If you can have, for the same price, or less, a system that doesn't have a central point of failure, wouldn't you rather have that? I mean, it only makes sense. There's also maintenance, service cost, and so forth. We are unique in the industry that we don't charge for service. We don't charge for on-site trip charges. We don't charge for moves, adds, and changes. We don't charge for help desk support. All of that is included as part of our monthly phone service fee. But a lot of the other companies do charge for that in addition to their monthly fee. So make sure that's clear. It can really run your cost up, and it can give you a bad experience. And the last thing is, this typically refers to when you're buying another box on the wall. You don't want to buy a system that's going to wear out or get old. So keep that in mind as well when you're making the decisions. Well, that's basically all that I had for you. I'm going to flip this back, and let me see if I've got any other questions here that have come up. And if you've got any, please put them into the chat, and I'll try to answer them for you. Let's see, I've got one here that says, we've heard that when using VoIP, it will not accept digital dials like typing in credit card numbers and so forth. I have seen that before, and you're right. It's not widespread. But I've even seen that. I've had that happen on my Verizon cell phone, for that matter. to where it wouldn't take the keystrokes. So it's not really a VoIP issue, and it's not one that we hear a common complaint by any means. It's very, very rare, and it tends to be more phone specific rather than being a VoIP specific type of thing. So I wouldn't really consider that an issue. I've seen that happen in other places. My Samsung phone, I've seen it more than once have that issue when I was trying to type in a confirmation number for a credit card number or something like that, and it just wouldn't take it. So, but that's a good point. Another question is, can you do conference calling? Yes, absolutely, you can. As a matter of fact, one of the there's several different ways you can do conference calling. We have a shared system, just like you're looking at here with Zoom. We have another system that does desktop sharing. It does conferencing. It's similar to a GoToMeeting or a Zoom that we offer as well. We also have just audio only conferencing. And one other thing that's very unique about us, I forgot to mention earlier, is we have unlimited incoming lines. When you have a spectrum system, for example, and say you're paying for 6 lines, if that 7th call comes in, they get a busy signal, and you may have lost that customer. They may have went somewhere else or called the next person on the Google search. With ours, that will never happen. There are no such thing as busy signals. You get unlimited incoming calls. If you can't take the call, maybe there's only one of you there in the office and you get 10 calls, you run a great sale or something, then it will roll over to an auto attendant and a voicemail. But if you're on a traditional line system, they just get a busy signal because there's no more lines for the call to come in of. So that's yet another feature of hosted VoIP. Let me see if there's any other questions. Let's see. How does texting work on a VoIP system? Texting, you can do a couple of different ways. We actually have a desktop app that you can launch right there on your Windows machine, and you can type in your text and it will go out. So you can do it that way. Also on the mobile app, it has a texting button on it, and it will pull from your contact list on your mobile phone, and you can text just like you do normal texting. There's no real difference. It's using the same contact list. It just goes out as either your own personal number that we've assigned to you in the system, or it can go out as the company number. We've got several choices. We can make the number look like anything you want it to look like. Now, with us, we do give you a free mobile app with the phone, with every extension, but additional features like texting do have an additional charge for them because there are some additional costs involved with texting. But just to make and receive phone calls, do intercom transfers, all of that, that's free. That's part of the free mobile app. I'll be happy to go over any of those details if you'd like to see it. Let's see what else we've got here. I think that's the last of the questions. So I'll give you a moment to type in anything else. Otherwise, I think we got done way in advance, so that was good. I really appreciate you guys being on the line. I am recording this, so I'm going to send you out a link to the recording when we're done in case you wanted to take a look, share it with friends, whatever it happens to do. If you are interested in finding out more, please give me a call, shoot me an email, or if you have a business associate that might be interested in this great new technology, let us know. We do love referrals, and if you do send us a referral, we give you a month of service and the referral a month of free service as well. So we have a great referral program for that, as well as for IT for that matter. So we do the same thing. So please spread the word about this great new technology. And I really appreciate it. You guys have a wonderful day. Thanks.